Okay, this is stage 2. 14.21 miles, Campbell Lake. Thank you. We are armed. Thank you. This is left 5, Titan 4 plus over small crest 70. Left 5 minus over big crest long 150. 15. 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! Titans 4 plus over small crest 70. Left 5 minus over big crest long 150. Left 5 plus long. Into right 5 plus, Titans 4 plus, over crest very long, slippy. Into left 5 plus, no cut, over crest 100. Left 4, soft 100. Left 6 over crest 250. Left 5 open, long, kinks 200s. Go, go, go. Right 5 minus over small crest, Titans 4 minus 70. Left 6 over small crest. Repeat, left 6 over small crest, Titan 5 minus, long, soft, Titan 4, long, soft, right 5 over small crest, stay in, 120, left 6, no cut, 50, stay right over crest 200. Left 6, no cut, very long over crest 180. Keep it in, left 6. Go, go, go. Right 6 over crest 70. Go, go, go. Left 5 plus 70. Right 6 over crest. Left 5 minus over 150, soft, Titans, 100. Small crest into right 6, extra long over crest 120. Caution right 5 plus through junction bumps.
Is this the one that's
no.
Maybe it is.
Ugh. 50. Stay left over long small crest. 300. Go, go, go. Right 6, 50. Small crest 300. You're not accelerating. Brake left 4 into water 150. Go, go, go. Go.
Shut up.
Right 5 plus 70. Left 4 plus through rough.
Next.
Right 5 plus
Thanks.
180. Right 5 plus stay out. Tighten 150. Long small crest 200. Flat over. Caution left 6 plus short into turn right 2 deceptive 180. Go, go, go. Way too early.
It's deceptive, remember? Let's look at that. Ah.
Crest 50. Left 6, tighten 5 plus soft 100. Left 6 soft, long 70. Right 5 long. Into stay left over small crest, turn right 2 plus. Up there.
Thanks. Sorry, a little
Left 5
oversteer there.
plus 50. Right 4 plus open over small crest, very long, no cut 70. Crest. Left 5 soft open 70. Right 5 minus soft. Left 5 open tighten 4 minus soft. Caution right 5 minus. Repeat right 5 plus. Stay mid long over small crest.
Red cross.
Yep. Oh, red cross. Okay. Pull up and park on the right side behind Jenko. We're officially done. He needs to be throwing the red cross again.
I have a radio.
Yep, your radio. I'm gonna... Yep. There you go.